Welcome back to State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. Thank you for tuning in. We have a fun episode today. Lots of stuff to talk about. We're talking about the evolution of LaMelo Ball and how he's become a more effective NBA player over the years. The Washington Wizards, who went winless throughout the entire month of November, and a lot more. Welcome back to State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. Thank you
Atlanta Hawks,
for despite an albeit middling record to start the NBA season, and also a lack of true growth from what we're seeing on the court for Onyeka Okongwu, they have shown this year that they do have a clear direction in terms of what this team is going to be moving forward. And more specifically, how they're going to operate under the lead of Trae Young and finally figure out how to fit pieces next to him. Because credit to them, ever since they have decided that Trae Young is the franchise guard for that team, they have tried to fit guys around him and constructed a roster that is going to be positive to Trae Young's strengths. However, they have not managed to do that up to this point. But this year does look like a positive direction for that. And with that, they do have a clear direction for their franchise because this is a point guard that you were to build around. But you have to do it correctly, especially for a guy like Trae Young, who can at times be inefficient, who at times doesn't have the best shot selection, even if he is going to make those deep threes, who has had great playoff moments in the past, but also had very disappointing playoff performances. In terms of defense and efficiency, Trae Young can be quite the wild card, night in, night out. But at the same time, he's also a smaller point guard, and obviously he's not the greatest defender in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but what he is a great offensive engine. And if you are able to put the proper defensive talent around him and just really good support pieces, because Trae Young, as great as he can be on the offensive end, at times he isn't having a good game, and you have to have other guys to go to. And they tried it out with DeJounte Murray, and they gave DeJounte a little bit too much of a role in the offense to where it was really a detriment to DeJounte Murray's defense, because really the main selling point of the backcourt between Trae Young and DeJounte Murray was that Murray can make up for Trae Young's defensive flaws. However, in doing so, there weren't a lot of secondary creators on this team outside of Trae Young. So in doing so, you give DeJounte Murray a lot more offensive responsibility than he had in San Antonio, where he experienced a lot of success. And as a result, his defensive performances for the Atlanta Hawks, they were much lower than they were back when he was on the Spurs. So that pairing ultimately did not work out because you had to lean too much into DeJounte Murray offense, and as a result, we saw his own flaws on the defensive end, which was what he was brought in to make up for. But the way the roster is currently constructed, I think that it's in the best position it has been in a long time, is maybe ever, alongside Trae Young, and especially in that backcourt with Dyson Daniels, the Great Bay Area Thief, as they're calling him. I believe he is leading the NBA in steals per game right now, and he has just been a great addition alongside Trae Young in that backcourt. And that is also because of the rise of another guy who's able to take some shots. So as a result of that, Dyson Daniels isn't asked to do too much on the offensive end, much like DeJounte was. I'll get to that guy in a second. But with Dyson Daniels specifically, he is a great, great defender. He has plenty of size, especially for the point guard position. And as a result, he makes up for Trae Young on that end almost perfectly. He is a perfect complement to Trae Young in that backcourt. Because Trae Young is always going to carry the offensive load. He is always going to be the true offensive engine for this team. But his defense leaves a lot to be desired. But Dyson Daniels has fit alongside Trae Young perfectly and been a great defender on the perimeter for the Atlanta Hawks. And that's great to see. And that's truly the first step to building around Trae, because that is the most obvious fixable, not non-fixable issue, really. Because Trae Young, at this point in his career, he has not committed to being that much of a better defender. He has improved compared to rookie year Trae Young, but there's definitely a ceiling there, and maybe we're already at that. He is not going to get significantly better on the defensive end, and as a result, it becomes less of a coachable issue and more something you just have to build around and cater to. And you can argue if that should be the case, but that is how the Atlanta Hawks are going about things. And so to add in Dyson Daniels on the defensive end in that backcourt, that is huge for the Atlanta Hawks. Finally having backcourt piece that fits alongside your franchise star. Now, on the offensive end, one player to really highlight here is Jalen Johnson. He got off to a pretty slow start to the NBA season, but ever since then, he has really turned things around and been the best version of himself. Now, the reason the DeJounte Murray pairing didn't really work out that well for Atlanta was because he was asked to do a lot on the offensive end, and it hindered his defense because he doesn't have the instinct to go out and do both. He doesn't have the motor for that. But now you're able to split the workload into Jalen Johnson leaning into the offensive end and Dyson Daniels on the defensive end. And both of them, they can carry their own weight on the other side of the ball as well, but that's just what they specialize in. So to have both of these guys who can play two ways and just lean into one way or the other to where it best complements this team, that's really huge. And I think that is really the key to unlocking this roster. And they've really done a good job this year. Technically, their record hasn't been the greatest, but that's been the case for a lot of teams in the East this year. It's really just been the Cavs in Boston that are really getting out there and having great starts to the season. For Atlanta, I think there's a lot to build around here. I think having a core of Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, and Dyson Daniels can really work out in terms of just how they fit one another. Obviously, Dyson Daniels and Jalen Johnson, they don't necessarily project to be stars, especially one to the magnitude of Trae Young. But the way that they can fit alongside him, that's huge. And I think that they really have a clear direction for how they're going to complement Trae Young, how they're going to build this roster around him, and just create a more meaningful team, a team that actually has aspirations. Instead of being maybe a first-round playoff exit in recent years, being a play-in team, they have a clear direction now. With the loss of DeJounte Murray, they've really stepped in and improved their roster. And Clint Capela's still there. I think that experiment has really kind of ran out of gas. But at the end of the day, he is still a solid center that you can trust to have consistent minutes. Is he going to be a ceiling raiser? Certainly not. And you have a high potential center behind him as well in Onyeka Okongwu. But at the end of the day, if they are sticking with Capela the way things are right now, I don't think that is a detriment to your team. Capela's not going to hurt your floor. You can argue he might hurt your ceiling, but if they are going to stick with Capela, and arguably they should move off of him for Onyeka, it doesn't really hurt your team that much. And really the main core of this team, the main bread and butter right now is how they are fitting Dyson Daniels and Jalen Johnson into this lineup and really the impact that they are making for the Atlanta Hawks. It's been great, and it really shows the clear direction that this team has in the absence of DeJounte Murray, and how in Murray's tenure here, he was just asked to do too much on the offensive end. But now you've got two guys who can complement Trae Young very well and who have complementary skill sets that are going to be huge for this team. The Washington Wizards went winless throughout the entire month of November, did not win a single game. And even for a team that is rebuilding, that is really unacceptable in terms of what we're seeing on the court from these guys. Because you still have some pieces to build around, like Alex Sarr, like Bilal, Coulibaly. There are some promising pieces on this Wizards team. But ultimately, it's probably really the guys up front, the real top options on this team, that are holding this team back. And obviously, they don't have many aspirations this year. So going winless isn't the worst thing in the world throughout an NBA month. But it's still not a good sign in a season as long as the NBA to where you're going to have so many games packed into 1 month and you can't pull out a single one of them. It's certainly not a positive for the Washington Wizards. And really, it's only up from here, you know. But I think the issues with this team really come from the top down in terms of how the workload is on this team. And kind of the maturity of the two top guys here in Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole. These are guys who are not necessarily winning players. Kyle Kuzma does have a ring. Same thing with Jordan Poole. But they are very different players from what they were back in the day, back on those Lakers teams, back on those Golden State Warriors teams, in terms of how they impact the game. Kyle Kuzma was once a very important piece on that championship team in the bubble for the Los Angeles Lakers. And that was a team that was led by a star frontcourt duo in LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And Kyle Kuzma, as a wing, was able to benefit off of that because of the defensive attention that was going to be focused mainly on LeBron and AD, and rightfully so. And then for Jordan Poole, there was a time where they were saying he was the third splash brother behind Steph Curry, behind Klay Thompson. And there were moments where it definitely looked like it. He had a great playoff run. Though I don't recall if that was the year they won the championship or the year before. And there were many games. There was a stretch where Steph Curry was out and Jordan Poole was asked to be the starting guard for that team. And he went out and he produced, absolutely. And he kept the Warriors in the thick of things. But now they go to Washington, and this is a team that doesn't have very high aspirations whatsoever, that is very much into a rebuild, especially with the loss of Bradley Beal in recent years. And even, John Wall before that. This is a team that for very long now has not even seen a hint of the playoffs and not even really been trying to do so. And so Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole, they go to this team, and they have the green light. And they're going to get their shots up, and it's not going to be perceived as a detriment to the team because the team isn't going anywhere in the first place. But the problem with that is now that you do have young guys that I would like to see develop a little bit more, that I would like to see you place a little bit more trust into. Jordan Poole's first season in Washington was not very good, to say the least. A lot of people had high expectations for him going into it because this is a guy that we know can score, and now he's going to have the green light over in Washington, but he went out and he had a really inefficient first season. Ultimately, it's been better this year. Kyle Kuzma has been the opposite. He's having a down year. But the Washington Wizards, my point with this here, is that they have some promising young players on that team now. And ultimately, these young players at this point in their careers, like Bilal Coulibaly and like Alex Sarr, they aren't going to lead you to the playoffs by any means. However, in my opinion, I think it does hinder their development. It also creates a negative culture when you have guys like Kyle Kuzma, like Jordan Poole, who are really just here to get shots up, enjoy their time in the NBA, and not really contribute to what matters most for the team and what is ultimately best for the team and its future. I think Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole are just not good fits in terms of future for this team, and they can be solid trade assets, especially Kyle Kuzma. I think he does have a place in the league, even if he's having a down year. Jordan Poole, I don't know what his fit is, especially on a team that would want to win some games. But I don't think they necessarily fit in here. Because even if you want to talk about the culture of it, you look at a guy like Alex Sarr, he didn't want to go to the Atlanta Hawks. He wanted to go to the Wizards and get his shots up. Because that is the culture that is around this team right now. That you go there and you have any semblance of some offensive talent, you're going to have the green light. They're going to let you take your shots. And credit to Alex Sarr, for having that idea of what he believes is going to be best for his development as a player. But ultimately, to become a true winning NBA player, you do have to learn how to play within a system as well. And the Washington Wizards, they don't have a lot of that. It kind of reminds me of the Houston Rockets back in the days with Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green leading that team. It looked like more of an AAU team night in, night out in terms of having a true game plan, a true scheme. There wasn't much of that. And I see kind of the same thing in this Wizards team right now. And ultimately, that's harmful for the development of these guys. No matter if they do want to get their shots up, a guy like Alex Sarr. Ultimately, if you are going to win at the highest level in the NBA, be the best version of you that you can be, you are going to have to play within the system at the very least. Now, some players, they can arguably be the system like a Nikola Jokic, but that is the top of the top, and most players are not going to reach that level. And ultimately, Alex Sarr has a lot of time ahead of him in the NBA to learn and grow as a player, and he absolutely will. But I think the situation that is going on in Washington right now is still not a good one for him, because this team does set the precedent that if you got any offensive talent, yeah, we're going to trust you. And ultimately, it doesn't allow you to fine-tune yourself as an NBA player. Yes, you can get in-game experience quite a bit more than you might in a place like Atlanta, where Alex Sarr was, originally projected to go as the number one pick. But having a situation of continuously losing and just getting your shots up regardless, that's not a good mindset to have, and you can develop bad habits that way. I think ultimately Alex Sarr will turn out as a fine product, but I don't think the Wizards are putting him in the best situation by any means. And for Bilal Coulibaly, obviously he is a great defender, but ultimately with him, he's put in a situation where his contributions aren't valued as much. Because what he brings to the table most is his defensive presence, and his offense comes second to that. And this is a team that has mainly focused on the offensive talents of its top options, and a team that doesn't look to win many games And so as a result, Bilal Coulibaly's role in the team is diminished because if this is a team that was really going out there looking to win games in all the ways possible, that's going to include quite a bit of defense and having really good role players around you. And that's what Bilal Coulibaly can be right now. And he's on in an environment where he isn't really allowed to do that and perform to his full capabilities either. Ultimately, these guys are very, very young. But I think the environment in Washington right now and the culture around it is not a good place, and especially for the development of young players who can be prone to developing bad habits. Because that's the biggest thing here, right? Ultimately, they're going to have plenty of time to get better as players, but bad habits can be hard to break sometimes. And, just the culture and mindset that this team can ingrain in you from a young age, developing in the NBA, trying to get better each and every day. They expect you as a player, as a young rookie player, you expect them to develop you to become the best NBA player that you can be. Because ultimately that is the expectation. And you're going to live with what they're telling you as coaches because you haven't got to see that in a different environment yet. What a successful NBA franchise might be doing. You're just seeing how the Wizards are doing it, and you think that might be the right way, and you can cultivate bad habits. And ultimately, I don't think it's going to matter much in the long run. These guys have plenty of time, but bad habits could be a bad sign in the future. And just coming from the culture of this team right now, that went winless throughout the entire month of November as a result of it. They'll be fine in the long run, but this environment for Washington is not the best place for their development by any means. They're just going to leave him out for a couple of weeks. LaMelo Ball has had his best season in the NBA yet, and is really showing his progression and his evolution as an NBA player. This is a guy from the 2020 draft, of course, with stars like Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton from that class. And LaMelo Ball was the number 3 pick behind James Wiseman. Ultimately, Wiseman did not pan out for the Warriors. Anthony Edwards has, so that's one of 2 from the first 2 picks. And then LaMelo Ball comes in at number 3 for a Charlotte Hornets team that was really just looking to rebuild and find their piece to truly build around. LaMelo has always been a very talented NBA player, of course, even going back to the high school days. But his game has just really needed some fine-tuning over the years, and he's absolutely gotten that, and he's got a chance to put that on display for Charlotte Hornets this season. This is a team that is taking a lot of threes, and sometimes they go down, sometimes they don't. But at the end of the day, LaMelo Ball has been the primary facilitator and leading scorer for this team that plays at a high pace, takes a lot of threes. And the ceiling of that, as we've seen by teams that have lived or died by the 3 in the past, the Golden State Warriors, the Boston Celtics, the ceiling for that can be very high, a championship level high. And LaMelo Ball at still a young age has taken the pressure of leading this team and handled it very well. And the most impressive thing about LaMelo Ball here is the fact that he can contribute to winning basketball. Because ultimately, as the point guard, a lot of point guards in the NBA are going to put up numbers because this is a guy that's going to be the primary ball handler, primary facilitator, primary offensive guy that's going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit. So as a result, maybe they take a lot of shots, make a lot of passes, and the counting stats might look good. But it's your efficiency and how you contribute to winning that really defines you as a point guard in the NBA. And that's the most impressive thing about LaMelo Ball because, yes, he can make the highlight plays. Yes, he can have some flashy passes. Yes, he can put up good counting stats. But he is really good for the Charlotte Hornets team and their future. And even right now, in terms of just wanting to win even any games. Because whenever LaMelo Ball goes down, the Charlotte Hornets are one of the bottom teams in the league. We've seen it in years past as well. When LaMelo Ball does play, however, this team is a lot closer to that play-in range. And ultimately, that's not the highest ceiling ever, of course, but it's a lot better than being bottom of the pack. And so we've already seen LaMelo Ball's impact on winning, and that's something that you really don't see from a lot of young point guards. Oftentimes, they're still trying to find their place in the NBA, still trying to draw the line between taking their own shots, when to pass it, when to just hand it off to someone else and let someone else carry the offensive workload, be the primary facilitator because it's just not your night. Some guys just can't find that sweet spot. And their production might look nice, but at the end of the day, they are not contributing to winning basketball. But LaMelo Ball has already went out and he has done that. And the focus on LaMelo is always going to be the highlights. It's always going to be on how good he can be as a player, especially for someone whose dad was as outspoken as he was about the talent of his sons. The focus is always going to be on LaMelo Ball's ceiling and his potential and his production. But what is most important about him, in my opinion, is the fact that he can contribute to winning basketball and be a solid piece for the Charlotte Hornets team and be really a franchise cornerstone for them moving forward. At such a young age, already having it really figured out and being a guy that contributes to winning. That's something you don't see from so many young point guards. And even LaMelo, to start off, perhaps he wasn't the most winning player in year one, and no one is. But some guys, they plateau at that, and they never develop as a player. They never do what it takes to be a proper, valuable, contributing NBA player in terms of what your production actually means on the court. But LaMelo Ball has done that, and that is the evolution of LaMelo Ball, where so many point guards, especially ones with so much attention from the media, as a guy like LaMelo can get, when so many of those point guards fail to develop and fail to be a proper winning player, when they can just sit back and watch the money pile up just because of the talent that they have and the stats they put up, even if they're empty. LaMelo Ball has not done that. He has done what the Charlotte Hornets needed him to do to at least get this team to a middling record and be a play-in team through the years. And when he's injured, you see that. You see the loss of LaMelo. And that's going to be helped a little bit this year by the addition of Trey Mann, who's been really good for them, even though he's also been dealing with some injuries. At the end of the day, as a point guard, your value is defined by what you can do for a team and their success, not just your production. And LaMelo Ball has gone out and realized that and evolved as a player and become the best version of himself. Forget the highlight plays, forget the flashy passes that you're always going to get from him. That's not the most important thing. That's not the best thing that he brings to the game. The best thing that he brings, and something that you don't see from a modern young point guard, is the ability to be a winning player, and LaMelo has absolutely been that and more. He's been the go-to guy on this fast-paced Charlotte Hornets team, and that's another thing about his development and his evolution as a player, is that this is a team that is taking a lot of threes this year, more than they have in the past, and LaMelo has been able to adapt to that and take even more threes himself, because ultimately teams are going to copy the winners. And the Boston Celtics, they were a three-point heavy team last year. They're even more so this year. Teams are going to follow the winners, and that's what Charlotte Hornets are trying to do too. And some point guards, they aren't willing to adjust their game when it matters most to help out your team, to really set the precedent for the rest of the guys on the roster. LaMelo has absolutely done that. So that is what gets me excited most about LaMelo as a player. It's not the highlight reel plays. It's not the eye-popping production. It's all the little things that he does, what he does in the locker room, being a true leader for this team. The evolution of LaMelo Ball as a leader has been great to see over the years for a guy that really could have been complacent due to his talent, due to all the potential that he was perceived as having. He could have been complacent and still got his money up and created generational wealth for his family and still had a spot in the NBA. But he has shown a drive, a willingness to compete, be the best player possible, be the most impactful player possible, and that is the evolution of LaMelo Ball. That is all for today's episode of State of the Association. I've been your host, Nash Roberts. Thank you for listening. This has not been my favorite episode, but at the very minimum, the floor is really higher than it was in the past because now we've got a better audio system, and at the end of the day, whether it's an off day on the podcast or not, I still have gotten better at developing and really just telling stories along with the reports and making more justified claims and backing it up and just being better at analyzing the game. And even on an episode like today, which I wasn't the biggest fan of, I still think that there were positive takeaways from it. And we've got better audio with it too now. So at the bare minimum, the floor on this is lower than it once was with bad audio, no real storytelling, and not being as good at breaking down things and not doing it for extended period of time either. So it's gotten better for sure, and ultimately, it's only up from here because this was, in my opinion, a down episode. But there's still positives to take away from it, and you just got to move on with those positives and also take in the negatives and be better for the next time around. And just get better each and every time. Thank you for tuning in. This has been State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts.